Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our next live stream. I'll be your producer for this session. Before we start, I do have some quick housekeeping. Please take a moment to read our code of conduct. We seek to provide a respectful environment for both our audience and presenters. While we absolutely encourage engagement in the chat, we ask that you please be mindful of your commentary, remain professional, and on topic. Keep an eye on that chat. We'll be dropping helpful links and checking for questions for our presenters to answer live. Our session is being recorded. It will be available to view on demand right here on the Reactor channel. With that, I'd love to turn it over to our speakers for today. Thank you for joining.
Hey, Jeff.
Hey, how's it going, Matt?
Pretty well. Hoping the thunderstorms here hold off so I can give the whole session.
Nice. Hey, I think I just saw you the other day.
I think so too. Yeah, indeed. These things happen. Probably, though, we should get to some of the slide stuff and talk about optimizing and shipping SQL and AI solutions and a little bit about DP-800 as well.
Sounds good. So, a little bit about me. My name is Jeff Taylor. I'm a Microsoft Data Platform MVP, Principal Data Consultant. There's my blog, my email, my Twitter, my LinkedIn, if you want to reach out and connect with me. I run the JAX Data User Group and the Day of Data Jacksonville Data Conference here in Jacksonville, Florida.
And that is one of my favorite days of the year, every year. This is me. I'm Director of Data and Analytics at Lean Techniques. If you hit that QR code there, that'll connect you with me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to chat about this stuff, and you can learn more about Lean Techniques there as well. But that's enough about me. Okay, so you're here as part of Data Days. Like I said, 60 days of data and AI. We've had lots of different MVPs hosting, moderating, all that. There is more of this to come. So if you just kind of popped into this and aren't familiar with the whole series, feel free to scan that code there and you can see what all is left and join the fun however you would like.
You could also go back and watch the old recorded videos of these sessions too. So
That's
keep that
true.
in mind too. So if you missed one, you can always jump back.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of certification stuff. So if you're studying for any of the exams, there's been lots of good stuff here.
And you can get them for free too. Check this out.
Yes, you can. So hit that link. It should also be scrolling at the bottom of the screen. But yeah, certs are helpful, and free certs are even better.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can join a study group as well. So there's a lot of local user groups and things like that. What can grow out of those, specifically around day-to-day stuff, is there are local study groups. Some of these are virtual. A lot of them meet in person to review kind of exam prep content in depth. So it's a great way to not only get ready for the exam, but get to know some of your fellow data professionals in and around your area.
And get some hands-on help and maybe some questions answered for your certification studies. So
yeah, because some of these are tricky. We'll cross paths with a couple slides later that might be good to chat through in person as well. There is a Data Days hotline session that is tomorrow. Like it says, 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern. It would be 4 p.m. CET. You can get your questions answered live. So if you're not able to make a local study group or there isn't one or whatever, the hotline session can be a cool way to get some live answers to the stuff that you're struggling with. The SQL AI Promptathon. So I was fortunate enough to be on a live stream about that a week or two back. That is a very cool way to get familiar, not just with kind of SQL's AI capabilities, but GitHub code spaces as well. Good ways for those of us that kind of live and breathe data to get in touch with the developer side of our mind a bit. And there's a contest. You can win stuff. So scan that link there if any or all of that sounds like fun. These user panels are great. one of the things I think for the different product groups on and off over the years, some respond to feedback really well, some don't. There's been kind of a purposeful effort to connect with users. So you've got the Fabric user panel there on the far left, the SQL user panel there on the far right. Great places to give feedback about functionality you like, functionality you don't, functionality you want. And if you're using this, there's a Fabric IQ user panel. You can join on that code in the middle there as well. But those are great feedback venues if you'd like to offer some.
And here are some sessions that are upcoming. So be sure to check on the Reactor site and sign up for any upcoming sessions that interest you.
There's some good stuff there.
Absolutely. All right. So today we are live and interactive. We actually have a few moderators here with us today. So we have Timu, who's going to be one of our moderators here. He's an MCT and senior data engineer. There's his LinkedIn information as well. We also have Jeff Shoemaker. He's a senior data support engineer for a casino systems company out in Las Vegas. He's also a Fabric community member, and there's his contact information as well. So if you have any questions, pop them in the chat. We'd love to hear from you throughout this session. So what we're going to cover today is we're going to talk through the DP-800 in some form or fashion. We're going to talk about implementing data security and compliance with SQL, optimize database performance, implement CI/CD with SQL database projects, integrate SQL solutions with Azure services.
All right. So what does kind of all that mean? So what are the core platforms that the DP-800 revolves around? Since it's kind of a newer exam, I think a lot of folks might not be familiar with the ground that it's trying to cover here. So the core platforms are SQL Server, Azure SQL, and SQL databases in Fabric. Key skills, as you see there, T-SQL Dev, something probably a lot of us are familiar with. Designing relational data models as well as semi-structured, which might be new to some of us. CI/CD with GitHub, I'm really pleased to see that in there because I know from experience it's something a lot of data teams struggle with. Still might be fairly new to many, so this is a good chance to kind of cover that ground and maybe bring that back to your team and implement some of that. Obviously, nothing is complete these days without discussing AI. This is centered on the AI fundamentals with what SQL can do for us, embeddings, vectors, the models that build those, and then AI-assisted development tools as well. So what role is it right for? I would debate a little bit the description of these roles because I think it's these aren't so much roles as like stuff you might run into. So I think this covers a lot of different data roles. But if you're trying to build secure database solutions, which hopefully we all are, this is a good exam for you to take. If you're interested in or being told to integrate AI into data-driven applications, this exam is good for that. If you're optimizing, deploying, and governing SQL workloads, which probably a lot of us are, this is good for that. And then that fourth bullet is if you're working with anybody, app devs, DBAs, architects, AI, DevOps, security teams, compliance teams, governance groups as well, I think you could throw in there. This exam will kind of prep you for all of that.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily just for developers too. I think anybody involved in data can learn from studying this as well. I think it's a great asset to maybe cover something you may or may not already know.
Yeah, the way I kind of look at this exam is if you've got any sort of data experience at all, DBA, developer, whatever, this is like a good nudge to kind of see some of the newer stuff and get ready for that or start to implement it now. But right, I think because it says role developer, some people are going to be like, well, I'm not a developer, I'm a data architect. I don't need that. But I think it's good for a lot of us. So what we're going to walk through here is this three-phase approach to building, production-ready, AI-enabled. This is not a drinking game, by the way. Every time I say AI, do not drink. We are not endorsing that. That is not going to end well. But phase one covers designing and developing database solutions. That phase name is going to be fairly familiar to you if you've taken older exams in the MCSE days and all of that. So you go over some of the basics. Tables, indexes, constraints, stored procs, functions, triggers. Yeah, I know we have to cover that ground, but anyway,
don't go there.
I'll save
Triggers.
my trigger rant. But yeah, we're going to talk about those and learn more about them. Some advanced T-SQL, which is always good. And then AI assisted authoring tools. So things like GitHub, Copilot, and SSMS and all of that. Then we should have phase 2 here. Yeah, here we go.
Yep.
It's going to cover everybody's favorite stuff. Security, super important. Governance, very important. Compliance. If you're in a highly regulated industry and you don't know some of that stuff, you're going to need to. Those can be, those can be risky moves if you don't know that. So it's good to be sound on those. Performance tuning as well, always important. It's always good to make stuff go faster. Part of the reason
because every little bit counts.
Work years and years ago. Yep. Yeah.
Well,
and especially when you're in the cloud, the less resources you use, the less it costs. Generally.
Yeah, exactly. Less it costs.
Yeah.
So
definitely optimizing and tuning what we've got is good. We talked about CI/CD with SQL projects. That's going to be unfamiliar to some. Really good time to jump into that. That team is doing a lot of work to have that where it needs to be. So it's a good time to learn it. And then obviously integrating all this with other Azure stuff and deploying it on Azure as well.
Hey, so I saw someone mention in the chat that they have an exam coming up. Who else is cramming for an exam that they have scheduled? Throw it in the chat. Let's see how many of you are actually really diving into this and have an exam scheduled, and you're trying to make sure you learn everything you can.
Yes. Yeah. And keep those moderators busy. They're awesome. So keep throwing stuff at them. So yeah, it'd be cool to see who all's getting ready for one. If you have some questions around that, it'd be fun to field some of those too. Phase 3, AI, of course. So what we're going to do, so this is going to be a little more practical view. So it calls it intelligent search. I would call it semantic search or hybrid search or something like that. But it's bringing the kind of AI enabled enhanced search into our SQL apps. So that's a good thing to know. It makes it allows you to return better result sets to your users because queries are going to bring back some stuff, especially when they're searching for things in like a bunch of text, some things they may know, but they've misspelled it or it's close. But so we're going to be able to return richer sets back. So that builds on things like embeddings, vector data, all that. And you're going to learn, if you're not familiar with RAG or retrieval augmented generation, you're going to learn that as well. So what are our objectives? So there's going to be 6 here. If you cover the whole learning path to prep for this exam, data security, number 1, very important, even more important these days, because even though we've got AI tools to make us go faster, the bad guys do too. So as they get more clever, it really pays for us to kind of stay on top of all of that. Secure access goes, hand in hand, obviously, with that. If you're unfamiliar with concepts like managed identities and things like that, this is a good introduction to that. So there's really, even though that's secure access, there's some cloud fundamentals built in there too. Or if the cloud's a little new to you, it's going to cover that ground for you. Performance tuning, of course, I'm a car guy, faster is better always. So this is going to get you familiar with all kind of the latest and greatest ways to do that and make that a little easier. Blocking and deadlocks as well. So like my user group hosted an awesome session last night from our friend John Morehouse on optimized locking. Blocking and deadlocks is going to cover some of the scenarios around that and parts of the reason that optimized locking actually exists. CI/CD pipelines, we've covered that as well. Something your developer friends are probably pretty familiar with, something likely newer to some of us. So you'll want to, you'll definitely want to kind of tune into that section and sharpen your game there. And of course, integrating this with the rest of Azure. And I think the really cool part about that segment, like okay, I'm just plugging stuff in, doesn't sound fun. If you're not familiar with Data API Builder, for me, that's kind of the highlight of that section. Calling REST APIs from SQL is cool, but Data API Builder is like the coolest tool that Microsoft never talks about. So I'm glad to see it as a part of this.
I was going to say, speaking of performance in cars, we should have included a picture of our cars that we race.
Well, I'm mad at my car now, so I'm choosing not to feature it until we fix it.
Uh-oh.
But yeah,
That's not good.
Fair enough. Fair enough. All right, Jeff. Well, why don't you take us through module 1?
Yeah, sounds good here. So in module 1, we talk about, implementing data security, and that's what this part of the module is. So this covers full spectrum of data capabilities across Microsoft SQL platforms. And you'll learn to implement encryption at multiple levels, mask sensitive data from unauthorized users, control row level security, manage object permissions with least privilege principles, set up auditing for compliance. So this module takes approximately 2 hours and 1 minute across 11 units. So there's a lot that they'll be covering in this. So it maps directly to the DP-800 exam and implement data security compliance, which is 35 to 40% weighted in the section of secure, optimize, and deploy database solutions. So this slide here is one of the ones that Matt and I were going back and forth about. This to me, confuses what's actually going on here, right? So there's something called always encrypted that came out a few SQL Server versions ago, and you could essentially create your master key on the server, and then you could encrypt specific columns in your database. So like social security number or a birth date. Now, social security number, you're probably going to want to search on that or filter that. So you need to use the deterministic encryption for that when you set that up. But something for like birth date, you probably could randomize it. And that would mean that the value that it encrypts it to is different every single time. Now, they created something new called Secure Enclave. So if you did actually need to search that data, you could go into your Secure Enclave and then in that secure environment, do queries and filters there. So that's something that they now have. Now, the certificate that's created, the key for that can sit on the DBA's machine or not, or the developer's machine or not, or the web application. Wherever that sits, that's who can actually unencrypt that data and see that in what it really is. So if you wanted to hide social security numbers from your DBA, you could by not giving them that key for that field, and that would keep it safe. So that's another level of security that you could put in place here, which for certain data is definitely something you should definitely put in place for that. So that's at the column level focused, right? So another level is obviously, I'm sure most of you have heard this TDE. So that's the transparent data encryption. And that encrypts the database files while they're sitting on the hard drive, while they are disconnected from the server, right? So if you disconnect it and reconnect it, you have to have the keys in order to get that database online, right? And then there's the always encrypted. And what that does is when the data comes from SQL Server, it is encrypted and it looks like var binary from the server when you select it across the wire, so you can't read it in plain text, right? And then in the application, if you have that certificate, then you can decrypt it. So that's what the always encrypted is. It means from the server to the client side, it is completely encrypted when you encrypt a column specifically.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the key takeaway probably for the exam from all of this is always encrypted is considered client side encryption. Column level encryption is considered server side. I suspect the way these slides are put together, that probably comes up on the exam. But yeah, it's interesting. I'm glad this is in there because I think it's really important. I don't see always encrypted a ton in the field. I don't know about you, but it doesn't mean it's not really important, and for some environments mandatory.
Yeah, I see it very rarely. I would love to see it more, and I've encouraged it more.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things that's another layer of, keys and certificates that DBAs have to manage and work with their security team on. And if it's not something that's required by the legal team, maybe because they have TDE already set up. They're sitting on a secure data storage. They feel that it's still good. But my takeaway is, okay, well, anybody who can get to the data could see it. But if you had column level encryption turned on, they could only see it if they had the key, right?
Right.
So they're not going to see that at all. So to me, that is really kind of where it probably should be from that aspect, to be really secure.
Yep. And I'd say if you have questions about this part, keep those moderators busy, toss those in the chat, and hopefully we'll be able to field a couple as well.
Yeah, actually, while we're saying that, anybody using column store or column level encryption, let's see if you or your company are currently using that. I'd be interested to know how many are actually doing that right now. All right, so another interesting feature that came out a few versions ago is the dynamic data masking. And dynamic data masking is really nice because you can allow users to see data but not see all the data. And what that means is that you essentially hide or mask like part of the email address, or you randomize a phone number, or you give partials of a phone number or username. But it doesn't encrypt the data, it just hides it. So if a user has read-only capability, they can see it, but if they have full access, they can see everything. So it's just a precursor safety feature that you could put in there. Now, if you do dynamic data masking and you say, like, take a database from production and restore it to QA or dev, your data is not masked. The live data is still there, so don't think of it as something to handle that way. So you need to obfuscate your data before it gets to those lower environments to keep it safe. Another option is row-level security. So you could create filters, you create different security requirements based on user roles or users or groups of users, apply those to a function for your data, and then filter it. So a sales manager can see anybody in his organization or his region, right? All of his managers underneath him are salespeople, but he can't see in a different region because you've set up row-level security. So that's a really, really great feature when it comes to limiting the view of data for end users of your data. And this works in all flavors, I believe, of SQL Server, and it can be used like inside of Power BI as well to help restrict your data when you have data that you want to display in Power BI as well. All right, so object level permissions and secure access. So you have various grant, deny, and revoke privileges. You have schema level, object level. You can always have a grant, but deny will always win, right? So you can use roles, you can use groups, and you can apply that to existing roles inside the database, or you can create your own. Just keep in mind, if you're creating your own, you got to make sure you store that in source control, because if you're going to deploy that, you want to make sure that that group that you're moving between dev and QA and production, while it may be a different domain or maybe a different set of users, that role is still tied to that object. So you need to make sure you move that along with your deployment process.
Yeah.
And then now with the new modern secure access, you have passwordless authentication, right? You have Entra instead of SQL Server, and certain flavors like Fabric SQL Database only allow Entra or managed service IDs to connect to it. So you can't do the standard SQL Server authentication anymore, which is not really the best right now anyways, because it can potentially be hacked. So you really want to stick with MFA or a service principal to connect to your database to make sure that is the most secure that you can do. Or if you're still on-prem, maybe global managed service accounts as well. That's
Something
also a
like
good
that.
option there. Yep.
Yeah, I suspect, I know this exam hits on managed identity because that's how a lot of Azure works. Like you're basically telling a service or an application, like you're this ID, I treat you like a person basically, and I give you permissions to do stuff. I don't see managed identity a ton with, obviously SQL, but I know like a lot of my demos I've started showing with Azure SQL I turn the managed identity on, and then the database has creds to go do other stuff with other services. So I think that's getting to be a modern model. So I'm glad to see it here, because
especially in dealing with like Fabric or like Azure Data Factory, like that's becoming or has become the standard for access control there.
For sure. Yeah.
Another thing that I really like about SQL Server 2025 and Azure SQL Database, if you're on vNext, is the ability to call secure API endpoints now inside of it. So you can actually make a REST API call from inside of there. Now, if you're in Azure, you can only call Microsoft APIs, but if you're on-prem, be careful, you can call everything. So it doesn't matter. So you got to be careful about that. Maybe have your network guys restrict what you're calling to, only open the door to what you should be calling, just to keep it safe.
Yeah, nice to have the option, but it doesn't mean all of your T-SQL should be calling REST APIs all the time.
No, that could be a little problematic, and your SQL Server will be sitting there waiting for responses, and that's not really what you want to pay SQL Server to do.
Good.
So you got to be very careful with that. All right, so auditing and compliance. So SQL Server has the ability to set up server level and database level audit specs. It can write to event log or file targets, so you can keep that on the server or off the server if you want to put that in a secure location so nobody can tamper with it. You have audit groups, batch completed, login change, schema object access, fine-grained action groups per DB object, combined with extended events for diagnosis. So you can set this up pretty much any kind of way you want and track what you want to audit, which is great. And you can track how much or how little you want to audit as well, which is nice. Azure SQL auditing, you have the built-in auditing to blob storage or log analytics, automatic capture of all DML and DDL ops, integration with Microsoft Defender for SQL, threat detection, SQL injection, and anonymous access. So there's a 90-day default retention period, configurable to years. And obviously, if you wanted to, you could pull that out and store that in your own storage and keep that indefinitely, or however long you want. However long your legal team requires you to keep that is what you need.
Yeah, you tend to not get to pick the length. Somebody that's a lawyer says this long, and then you do it. Yeah.
And honestly, you may not want to have that wait either. So let them decide, let them pay for it. Say, hey, you asked for it, you got it, you paid for it. Right. Here's how much it is. That way it's off of your boat.
We're going to try to keep everybody attending this session out of jail. So
exactly. And then compliance features. So data classification. This is really sweet. It came out in 2019 SQL Server, and it has a little tool in there that'll actually go and attempt to classify your data. So if it thinks it's a social security number or name or phone number, it'll label it as whatever type of data, like PII or private data that is. You can go there and modify it, which is nice as well. So, and then there's other tools that connect with that as well, integrate, so that you can keep that, and that stores with your schema. So when you checked it in the source control, you can have that available and move that with your data, that classification. You can use that for other tools out there as well. Vulnerability assessment, automated security scans, advanced threat protection, alerts, Azure policy for enforcing audit standards, GDPR, HIPAA, SOC 2 compliance evidence. So these all help with keeping you in line with those requirements and guidelines from your state and local governments or your country, and what all is required for you there. So what should you do? Here's a quick guide. Choose the right security based on what you need to protect and from whom. So DBA must not see plain text data. Use always encrypted with a column store encryption, right? And don't give them the certificate for those columns. Encrypt those columns. The server and the web server can trust them, right? Because they're serving them to the client, but the DBA doesn't get that. Now, the DBA still may need some other ones, but for certain ones, he may not, right? So you can create individual different certificates and apply them where you need to.
Yeah.
Hide values from other users if you just want something to where they can kind of query the system, test it. So like a scenario would be like, hey, I need to go troubleshoot production. I need to see the real data and check a few things, but I'm going to data mask it because I got read-only access to production. That's a great use for data masking there, to just quickly turn that on, hide everything, but they still can kind of like see what's going on a little bit underneath the covers without actually seeing the data. And then for row level security, only see what the user needs to see, nothing else, right? That's the best option for that, restricting the user. And this goes for data warehouses, SQL Server, apps, whatever. And then restrict those who could query tables or execute stored procedures. If you don't need to execute, don't give them execute, right? Grant least privilege to all your users. No one needs SA except for maybe the DBA sometimes.
I mean, I always do, but
I mean, yeah. I mean, those DBA because you and I are sitting there managing the whole system.
That's
but
right.
A developer, an app never needs SA. I don't care. There's a way to give you access without that. No developer or application needs that ever. And then eliminate passwords from application code. So if you can eliminate the passwords, use managed identity. It saves you the trouble and it gives it to your security admins, and you don't have to worry about it, right? Something else out of your hair. Track who accessed what, when, and how. Auditing. Turn it on. Keep a log. It's better to know what has happened than turn it on after and be like, oh no, we don't know what happened. So turn it on now, take care of that problem before it hits. And then detect SQL injection. So you could use Microsoft SQL Defender for SQL and monitor that ongoing.
All right. It is time for Module 2. Yep. So we spent a lot of time on that section because A, it's really important. B, some of that stuff's probably not familiar to everybody that's going to be taking the exam. We're going to go through this module quicker because we're optimizing performance, so we're going faster. But also some of this may be a little better known. So this slide's a really good reference. I'm not going to read through everything here, but I do want to call out a couple of things. First of all, for me, Hyperscale is the best service tier that Azure SQL has. It got, I wouldn't say a bad rap, but a lot of people think like, oh, I can only use Hyperscale if the database I have is really big. You can certainly use it for those. Like it says, it can handle up to 128 terabytes and more. You can also put small databases on this. Like I show all my demos on this because the architecture of Hyperscale for me is the way SQL Server in the cloud should look. We can't get nerdy about that here. The learn page on the architecture of Hyperscale is really good. So I do kind of want to call that out. Like Hyperscale is great, price competitive. So definitely check that out. It's what I use for almost everything.
And I'd also add in there that there are no SQL Server licensing costs with Hyperscale. It's tied in to the cost of your compute for that.
Right.
So that's also another added benefit there besides turning the dials all the way up or all the way down.
And you can also, like it says in the second bullet there, take backups near instantly because of the way the data is stored. Those of us that are familiar with when I back up the server slows down. No issue with that here at all. So what are some of the highlights we want to hit here? General purpose is going to be the default for most workloads, thus the name. That makes sense. That first bullet is something I do want to call out. It uses premium storage, but that storage is not co-located with the compute. So there's some inherent latency there. So be mindful of that. Business critical, like it sounds like, it's the best. It's the highest performance, local SSD. So everything's co-located there, but it's more expensive because you're paying for that performance and all of that good stuff. We talked about Hyperscale, of course, really, really cool. Serverless, I hate this name because they're servers. There's not magic. There are servers behind this, but the reason it's called serverless is because it auto scales and auto pauses, and you don't have this pool of provisioned stuff that's just out there waiting on you. You can give it kind of a floor and say like, okay, my minimum workload is going to be, this much compute. And then if you need more, it's going to scale that for you, but it's not it's not magic. There's still servers.
It should really be called scalable SQL Server, right?
Yeah,
because
the
you can scale
marketing
it up
people
and down.
don't agree. Everybody's got a serverless offering. So
I do like now that it'll actually shut off after 15 minutes, though, thanks to Fabric. That's actually been reduced. It used to be an hour, but now it's 15 minutes. So it'll save you some money.
Somewhat handy, yeah. There are two different purchasing models. DTU, I would say, is kind of the classic one, more legacy, but it's still here, like it says, bundles CPU and IO and memory together, and so a DTU is a certain amount of all of that. You'll see the older, lower service tiers at that, but it's still viable. The vCore model is most of the newer ones. It allows you to some extent, I know it says independent CPU memory and storage scaling, mostly independent. There are some ties there because, again, there are servers underneath this stuff. It's Azure Hybrid Benefit eligible as well. So if you're not familiar with that, if you're migrating from on-prem to Azure, great way to cut your pricing by basically saying, yes, this is a licensed server and I'm moving it up to Azure. If it's not licensed, don't do that because you'll get in trouble. But if it's licensed, do that. Great and easy way to save money with a checkbox.
Yeah, I also want to add in here, you were talking about general purpose and business critical, about how, you have the premium SSDs and they're separate. There's actually a few new flavors of VMs which are near bare metal. So they are configured pretty much the same way that your data center, if you had a colo and a server sitting in there, would be, with NVMe on the server, a SAN attached to the server, right? That you're getting, or you can get, 800,000 IOPS, 1.2 million IOPS on those NVMe drives. And that's a new series that David Pless and his team have put together, which are really sweet.
Very cool. All right. We'll get into some transaction isolation levels and concurrency. Again, this is a good reference slide. I do like the way it's laid out, kind of shows you the risk of blocking and some of that. Just some highlights to hit here. Important thing to call out, like the chart says, if you're on read uncommitted at isolation level, dirty reads are allowed. So if you're in an environment, which most databases are, where dirty reads are not okay, you need to read committed data. You need to stay away from that isolation level. You won't get blocked very much. It'll be very efficient, but you may get data that you're not supposed to.
You mean I shouldn't use no lock?
Never use no lock, Jeff. It's not cool, man. We could do a whole hour about that. Read committed is what SQL Server defaults to, so it does prevent dirty reads. That's kind of the highlight there. Repeatable read, I got to be honest, I don't see this very much. It holds locks until the transaction ends. I see that very
expensive.
And it's usually to correct like a very specific problem that's really in your code. So we try to stay away from that or mitigate what the issue is that it's kind of forcing us there. Serializable, it uses range locks. It is the strictest isolation level. If you love to troubleshoot blocking chains, turn that one on. Snapshot uses row versioning, like it says MVCC there. So you're getting transaction consistent views of the data. You're really not getting blocking there. Read committed snapshot is critical to understand for the exam. So Azure SQL has it on by default. And what it means is readers never block writers and vice versa. So if there's one takeaway from this slide, it's that Azure SQL has read committed snapshot, or you'll hear that called RCSI on, and that means readers never block writers. So we'll keep things moving here and get on to execution plans as well. Okay, so some important things to call out here. You can go down the rabbit hole on this. We could do a whole day on this, and people do. The estimated plan, it compiles it without execution. So it's basically saying, hey, when the optimizer tackles this query, here's what it's going to do. Here's roughly what it thinks it will cost, and what the row counts involved are. The actual plan, as you might guess, though this is a little bit debatable, the actual plan does include actual row counts and memory grabs, runtime stats, all of that. Key operators to watch. Again, we could go hours on this. A table and index scan means something's being fully scanned. generally that's raising a flag to tell you, hey, actually you should have a better index here, but because you don't, I have to look at everything. Key lookup is going to be a non-clustered index and clustered index hop. So again, that's just kind of a red flag that there's a tuning opportunity there. Sort with spill, like it says there, means not enough memory has been granted to get the query to run optimally. That could be because the server doesn't have it, because your max memory is set too low, something like that. But a thing to keep in mind. Implicit conversion means basically the data types are mismatched when they're compared as part of the query execution. That is a really good call out to get that corrected, because what it means is you can't do an index seek. Index seeks are generally quite fast. Key DMVs, we don't need to go through all those, but I would say I would agree with this list that probably those are your top 6 that you want to dive into to know what's going on with the box. But let's get to the next slide, which is query store, maybe a little less familiar.
I love me some query store.
It is good stuff. Very, very
good. How many
stuff.
of you in the audience are currently using query store, and how many of you actually have looked at queries in production and changed something because of that? I'd like to see how many, because I use this all the time.
Oh yeah. And if you're not, please do. I know when it came out, it got a little bit of a bad rap about like a slight bit of performance overhead as it was compiling stuff. If that ever existed, and in some environments it did, like it's pretty much gone now. Query store is on by default in everything. So definitely use it. You're missing out. It is a critical performance tool. Like if you're running modern SQL Server and Azure SQL, you need to have it on. It makes your life as a DBA so much easier. Stores the text, the query, stores the plan, stores the runtime stats as well. It does do plan history tracking, so it will flag a plan that's regressed, so you don't have to like build your own monitoring to kind of figure that out. It's just going to say, hey, this plan is actually regressing for you. It's got a report to do just that. If you have a query that kind of hops around with plans and you know it's got a good plan, but sometimes it decides to use the bad one, query store, you can do that. You can hit a button. You can force that plan. So you can use your knowledge and say, that's always the good plan. I know it is. You can force it to use it. So that's handy, something the exam might touch on as well. And it does the automatic tuning stuff in SQL does rely on this to detect and correct some of the regressions without you having to do it. It's not always perfect, but certainly helpful. Query performance insight, if that's a new term to you, it's basically the name for the visualization layer in the Azure portal that shows you this stuff. So if you're running Azure SQL and not something on-prem, you're not connecting via Management Studio, Query Performance Insight gives you that kind of visual cue. As we're rolling downhill on time here, let's get to blocking and deadlocks to wrap this up. Again, a really good reference here. Some very basics. Blocking happens, if it's a term you're not familiar with, when a transaction holds a lock that another one needs. Simple as that. So that other one will wait. It is blocked until the original transaction releases that lock. If you look for a blocking session ID and sys.dm exec requests, you'll see that. And it's very easy, and kind of all the industry monitoring tools have a good way to show that as well.
I can't believe it has that suggestion in there. You see that down there for resolution strategies? It actually tells you to use no lock.
Yeah.
I'm going to disagree with that one there.
I'll get to that in a second. The recommended resolution, and I feel like this is a wink and a nudge towards an exam question. If you're seeing a lot of blocking, the one effective way to handle it is to turn read committed snapshot isolation, or RCSI, on. There are many others. Deadlocks, if you're not familiar with that, those are circular lock dependencies. Basically, so much stuff is grabbing locks on stuff that it's got into a big circular mess, and SQL will detect when that happens and kill what it would say is the lowest cost victim. Sometimes we're going to have to intervene there as well. The extended event system health sessions are a really good way to see that. Couple other things I want to touch on, even though I know we're getting tight on time and we got 2 modules to go, that use no lock hint only for monitoring. I would say never use it at all unless you feel like you absolutely have to. I would not ever call that a resolution strategy. Maybe a little bit of troubleshooting, but I would strongly disagree with that. But it's in the slide. Adding appropriate indexes to reduce lock duration, that's important. Like the quicker things go, the less they hold a lock, no matter how we've got this configured and all of that. Jeff, you got 16 minutes and we're up to module 3.
All right, so let's talk about CI/CD. How many of you are currently using CI/CD in your database projects right now? So Microsoft has SQL database projects, and you can store those in source control. You could deploy it from the database or from source control. You can store your objects with a .SQL extension right in source control. You can build a DAC pack from it. You could use SQL package if you wanted to deploy as well. There's also third-party tools out there which are really powerful that you could use as well for managing your deployment and orchestrating it. But the one key thing I would say is put your database in source control. Not only will it, save your butt, but it'll save your company's butt, because you never know when, oh man, I forgot to change it, or oh man, I overwrote something. You need to go back and source control.
I've had to fix those before.
Has saved developers so many times. So, and with Git, you can, use Azure DevOps or GitHub, and you can do branching. So if you want to take your own copy, change it and merge it back in. And it makes you, be efficient with what's going on, and also watch that schema drift. And also, if you put in audits, when you go to deploy to production, you can see, hey, wait a minute, somebody changed production without us knowing about it. Who did that? And then you can go look at your other audit logs and find out who changed it, and then have a talk with them, and then, teach them about CI/CD process with source control.
I always prefer to have a talk in quotes. I'm not endorsing violence, but when you watch the movie and the guy's like, I just want to talk to him. That's the kind of talk you should.
There was this old thing we used to do in IRC. We used to, hit somebody with a wet noodle. That's, one of those times. You can definitely do that.
Tools of encouragement.
Yes. Then you can automate this whole process, right? So when you check in, you can automate a build, you deploy it to dev, you can deploy it to your test environment, QA, UAT with gates. You can do schema compare validation, like I said, to check for drift and changes outside of your deployment scope. You can use T-SQL-T to actually test your SQL code, which I highly recommend.
Yes.
It's very useful to do that. You can do that in conjunction with all of your app unit tests. So you can bundle it all up together and put it in your development and deployment pipeline there to run through everything with a push of a button or a check-in of a piece of code. So you have lots of different platform support, Azure DevOps. Like I said, there's SQL package, CLI, cross-platform. You have a lot of tools outside of the Microsoft world as well. Depending on how complex your environments are, you may need to seek further controllable filters and tools for that. All right, number 4.
All right. It's a good thing they brought the race car guys in to go fast. All right. Module 4, we're going to hit some highlights here. So the first thing, like I mentioned, Data API Builder. If you're not familiar with this, I'm glad it's in the exam because it's definitely developer friendly for sure, but a place where data and app dev can intersect. So we'll hit some highlights here, and then I want to highlight a couple of the bullets as well. So if Data API Builder, if you've never heard of it at all, I have no idea what this does. What it does is it generates REST and GraphQL endpoints from your schema without any custom app code. You just point it at it and say, I need endpoints for this, and it makes it. The config is JSON driven, and basically what you do is you define entities, permissions, and relationships as well. Those are new terms to you, especially in this context. Strongly encourage you as you're preparing for the DP-800 exam to do the learning path on this. This is pretty cool to play with, I think, but I see it a lot more now. but I'd still say it's quite rare. So it's probably new to a lot of us. Definitely hit the learning path to understand better what those terms mean, and most importantly, how to define them, because I have a feeling the exam probably touches on that. The authentication, as you might guess, integrates with Entra. So things are authorized per entity and per field. So the security is pretty granular, which is good. We're not just creating an open endpoint on our database and letting things go nuts. The deployment options, you see those listed there. If we're, for pure data folks, a lot of those terms might be brand new, but we can, those top three are obviously Azure services. We can do local development there as well. You can deploy it to a Docker container. And if you need more advanced kind of gateway features and some greater security at that level, and other ways to manage the security of what's coming into this, Azure API management as well. A couple other things that I think we should highlight. So this doesn't just support SQL Server. I know here we're talking about SQL Server and Azure SQL, but it also supports Cosmos, MySQL, and Postgres as well. And if you're wondering, if you've talked to your app devs or kind of messed with a little app dev yourself, and you're like, oh, okay, that all sounds great. I can get result sets to come back from queries. That's fine and good. Can I filter? Can I sort? Can I do all that? Like that last bullet under core capabilities says, you can indeed do all that. It comes with it out of the box. So one takeaway here, and I'll mention this again, entities, permissions, and relationships are what this part of the exam is going to focus on. So if you already know how to configure those, great, you're set. If you don't, the learning path is going to be your tool to do that. There's more in depth than we could cover here in a demo, but definitely make use of the learning path to educate yourself on those. That will be very handy. Why don't we go to the next slide here? Okay, so I got to admit, I know this exam covers a lot of ground, and therefore Jeff in my session has to cover a lot of ground as well. The DBA part of my heart is very sad that monitoring got like half a slide. I'd say it's pretty important, but I understand in the context of the exam, it's not the featured attraction. So some stuff to talk about here. Azure Monitor, the metrics you're going to get in there are, things you'd expect: CPU, storage, connections, deadlocks, stuff like that. You can stream the log analytics. You can stream to event hubs, blob storage as well. The cool thing about this is if you drop all this to log analytics, you can use KQL to query it. That's the Kusto query language you can use to query event houses in Fabric. KQL is really cool. KQL and the engine underneath that does time series querying the best, and it's my favorite database engine that Microsoft's ever done. So it's a good excuse to play with and learn KQL. You can also set alert rules in Monitor as well. So if there are thresholds that get breached, you can have notifications go off. And
like when your CPU hits 100.
The stuff that's
how many of you have hit CPU 100% and the server just is like, I'm not doing anything else?
Yeah, when your server might literally be on fire.
Yes.
Event-driven change patterns. So I'd say there's a glaring thing that's left out here, and I'll cover that at the end. So change data capture, know it, maybe love it. It tracks row level changes to tables and then kind of stores those off in another table. So you can go query, what changed, who changed it, all of that. Change tracking, a little bit older school, a little bit lighter weight. It is change detection. I'd say it's more limited than CDC, but a fairly similar model. We'll cover a couple of these because the exam may refer to them. So SQL triggers and Azure functions technically allow you to react to a database change in real time. Those of us that had spent any part of our careers at DBA probably have a love-hate relationship with triggers at all, but they are a thing that exists, and it's helpful to know what they can do. Logic apps, they, like it says there, they're kind of an automation workflow service in Azure. Database events can be used to trigger those. They're essentially They're apps that are just a bunch of JSON that invokes service calls, like when an event happens, do this other stuff. So the basics of logic apps are that they check for an event happening somewhere, a database in this case, and then they trigger an automated workflow from there. Event hubs allow you, so it says stream database changes to downstream consumers. In my opinion, what it left out and what should absolutely be on this slide is change event streaming. That is a new feature in Azure SQL Database. That is a new feature in SQL Server 2025 as well. What change event streaming does is basically in memory. So you're really not inducing a performance overhead. I know Microsoft calls it IO lists. There's still IO, but you're not leaning on storage necessarily to do this. It takes a committed transaction, packages it up as a cloud event, which is an industry standard way to kind of stream things that happen. And then you're able to receive those in an Azure Event Hub, like it says here, but also Fabric Event Stream, and then do all kinds of cool stuff with it from there. So the exam may or may not cover that. Change event streaming is one of my favorite features that's new to SQL. So I wanted you all to know about that as well. A couple other highlights before we wrap things up here. We mentioned calling external REST APIs directly from T-SQL. That is done via SP invoke external REST endpoint. It is very cool. That is a fundamental part of when you talk about the AI capabilities of SQL. It calls external APIs, or it can, to create the embeddings to store the vectors. You're going to need to understand.
So it allows you to create all your embeddings, which is nice. So I actually have a couple blogs written about how to use that. I really like that new feature.
Yes.
And I've used it also to pull data for our day of data event from APIs that are available to us, like Eventbrite and Sessionize. So I really like that feature
for sure,
there, but use it sparingly.
Yes. A couple other things before we jump off this slide. Understand Azure Functions and SQL bindings. So how Azure Functions database access work. Understand the SQL connector in logic apps as well. Those may or may not be on the exam. So familiarize yourself with those and hit the learning path to get more of the details. Let's get to some takeaways, Jeff.
All right. So always encrypted protects data even from DBAs if needed. Dynamic data masking is obfuscation, but only based on role. But it's not encryption, right? So you still need TDE as well, even if you use all the rest of this. So row-level security filters allow you to combine session context, meaning your user or who's connected, and their role, and your filters to what data they can or cannot see. Passwordless authentication, managed identity, eliminates the need for credentials and risks and application code. You don't have to store your username and password in code. It helps that. Then choosing service tiers based on workload, general purpose, business critical, low latency, serverless, but not really. Query store tracks historical performance and enables automatic plan regression correction. I love this, and I always tell my dev teams, look at what was there 2 weeks ago, and now look at what happened since you just deployed your new set of code. Find out what's actually the problem and go back and fix your code. Anyway.
I agree. All right, let me grab these last few to kind of bring us home here. Read committed snapshot isolation, or commonly RCSI, is what Azure SQL defaults to. And like we said, it eliminates reader-writer blocking. It makes your life much better. SQL database projects actually bring declarative source-controlled schema management to us with CI/CD pipelines like our app dev friends have. This is very cool stuff. Microsoft's invested in the team that does that. The team's doing great work. So familiarize yourself with that. The exam's likely to cover that. We talked about data API builder, right, or DAB fairly recently. But like we said, it generates REST and GraphQL endpoints. And most importantly, they're secure, and that security is granular, but we can create those from our schema with that tool. That monitoring slide covers a lot. We just went over this, but understand that Azure Monitor is the observability thing the exam is going to cover. things like CDC and Azure Functions with SQL Trigger and all of that enable event-driven architectures. In the context of the exam, I could debate event-driven architectures in SQL and have a session on it, but that's not what we're here to talk about, and there's only a minute left. So to prepare for the DP-800 exam,
go prepare, go
link.
Learn. Yeah,
Yes.
hit this link, go learn, go study. You could set up a developer free edition of SQL Server in Azure for free, or download the developer edition, now available in both standard and enterprise. So go ahead and do that, and obviously sign up for a free cert.
Yes.
Go check this link out, and then join us for more events in the future for our 60 days of data and AI powered by the community. Thank you for joining, and we hope you learned something. And we will talk to you later.
Best of luck, everybody. Bye.
Thank you all for joining, and thanks again to our speakers. This session is a part of a series. To register for future shows and watch past episodes on demand, you can follow the link on the screen or in the chat. We're always looking to improve our sessions and your experience. If you have any feedback for us, we would love to hear what you have to say. You can find that link on the screen or in the chat. And we'll see you at the next one.